Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 12th of November and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 60, season 8 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. Once again, we've gathered together this week's big car retailing stories across the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place, on demand, on your podcast feed.
Well, just before we get on to a few shout outs for this week and a few updates as well, apologies to those that did tune into last Saturday's podcast. We had a bit of a technical glitch. We had to get the tech team out. That was me.
That was you and your screwdriver, wasn't it? And soldering
me and my screwdriver whilst down in Wales, yes. So do apologise for that. If you did try tuning in and not managed to do so, we did reissue the podcast on Tuesday. So the podcast that was meant to be aired last Saturday is still on your podcast feed. So if you haven't listened to it or you didn't pick it up when it did get reissued, then it is still there. You can go back to it and you can listen to last week's podcast. So do apologise for that. We something went severely wrong, but I will blame the tech side and not the operator on that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what a shout outs we got. I mean, the biggest shout out probably is interestingly that I think people had a perception that we sat together on a weekly basis, Curtis, and recorded these podcasts, and they were quite surprised that we hadn't actually met in person for probably getting on for 5 years.
Yeah, it is a long time, and you're right. People think we're sat eyeball to eyeball doing this, but we're probably separated by, I don't know, 300 miles.
And people should probably pick up on that when we talk me going down south and you coming up north or north.
Yeah, exactly, because I went up to Birmingham and you went down to Birmingham.
Yeah, and I think we had the same kind of distance and time on the motorways as each other. But yeah, no, it was absolutely fantastic. And I think AM Live this week down at the NEC Birmingham was very busy. I think a great turnout. I think everybody gave fantastic feedback on the event, and I think it was great to. It was great to see everybody on it in person that you've kind of been in touch with over the years, but you hadn't actually met over that time.
Yeah, no, it was a great event, and big shout out to the team at Automotive Management who put it together. It was my first visit. I know you've been a number of times in the past, Phil, but certainly all the time I was on Motor Trader, we kind of had this sort of unwritten understanding that we didn't go to each other's events. So for me to be able to go there was great. It was good insight to how other trade shows operate, and I thought it was a great format because the stands were easy to get around. It was nice and busy. You had all the speaker sessions, so there was plenty to do. And you could easily spend a day there and get a lot of information, a lot of insight, and network with a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, the general conversations when I was there there was a lot of networking and talking to people. Have you got what you came for? And they're going, I came to meet the right people, or I got in the conversations that I wanted to get into, or I saw the key speaker in the event that I wanted to sort of definitely go and see and get things from. So I think they got that balance right, and the positive feedback. I mean, we were there as our business. I was on a Q&A panel, and our good old friend John O'Hanlon and Ben Archer from Arbery Motors were on stage with me, and you never They always good value with our good old friend John O'Hanlon, as you know, Curtis.
Yeah, absolutely. Did he bring a birthday cake with him? Because I know they're celebrating their 5th anniversary at Wayland's.
He didn't, but he looked to be having a fantastic day, and we only had sort of half an hour, and I'm kind of waiting there going, yeah. Be careful, I'll get the conversation going in, because half an hour is not long when we've got John on stage talking and catching up on a few things. But absolutely fantastic, and I say great event, great day. Feedback, social stuff from it has been brilliant, and we got a picture together as well, Curtis, which seems to have gone down very well on the social channels.
Yeah, just to prove that we were in the same room at the same time.
But no,
And also in the news this week, Phil, is we've had a mini launch of ourselves, haven't we? With the Motor Trade Radio LinkedIn newsletter.
yeah, yeah. So it was kind of something that we've been talking about for a while. We thought how could we get the sort of headline links that we talk about on a weekly basis to the listeners for them to be able to easily get to the stories and easily download the podcast. And obviously we have a pretty big following on LinkedIn. So yeah, we've now got a newsletter. It's called Behind the Week's Headlines, through the Motor Trade Radio channel on LinkedIn. The plan is that we will publish it on a Monday. So after the weekend, after the Saturday podcast airs on the Saturday, obviously. So you can subscribe. We've got over 100 subscribers already. So please do subscribe to that, and what will happen is that will get fed directly into your LinkedIn feed and into your email, in your email feed, and that will give you all the headlines we've talked about, the links to the news headlines that we've talked about, and a link to the podcast as well.
Yeah, and it really is handy. It's all in one place. And I must add a shout out to a friend of the show, Ian Godbold, who stopped me at AM Live to say, the newsletter's brilliant. So he was one of our early subscribers. So do join Ian.
Yes, yeah, yeah. It's an easy way of doing it, and you don't get you miss all the clutter then on social. So yeah, great shout out there. And again, as always, if you do want to get in touch with us, then or come onto the show yourself, or send us a press release for us to discuss on the podcast, then please do email us at motortraderadio@yahoo.com, or getting in touch through one of the social channels, through Motor Trade Radio, LinkedIn, or the Facebook, or even just contact myself or Curtis as usual through any of those social channels.
And final shout out for this week is we're delighted to have Stephen Whitten from Men Able back with his latest Men Able moment. So that'll be after the midway break. So headlines this week are from Car Dealer, AM, Motor Trader, Auto Retail Agenda, and The Times, starting with drivers' worries over electric car costs push sales to 40-year low. Used car sales down 12% in Q3, first time sub 2 million mark since 2015. Nearly half of car buyers plan to spend more on their next vehicle purchase. Helston garages to be split and sold to 3 franchised groups. Stellantis UK introduces home delivery for its spotty car approved used cars scheme. And we've got an update on Carvana with a headline that says Carvana stock tanks in continued sell-off. Now, you may guess that that's actually not from a UK publication, that's from CNBC.
Yeah, tanks. Yes, yes, yeah.
Tanks, yes.
So we'll head over to the first story, and as you say, Curtis, there in the Times. So drivers' worries over electric car costs push sales to a 40-year low. So they're talking here that the downward revision, and they're talking. Well, part of this is about the SMMT, isn't it? Because the SMMT have recently down forecast their 2022 numbers. They seem to be catching up with me now, Curtis. They'll get a little bit closer now, but they've reforecast their numbers to 1.56 million. And they're sort of talking around the plug-in cars, saying that they've had a dramatic decline because of the cost of the electric, and it's put buyers off the EV market.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, this, isn't it? And the 40-year low, that's if it is a 1.56 million market, that will be the lowest point since 1982. which I think the Times in its coverage points out that that was actually Margaret Thatcher's first time in government. You were probably wearing short trousers at school, Phil,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, I don't yeah, I was
yeah,
young.
the
Yeah.
best-selling car was the Ford Escort Mark III,
Yes.
followed by the Ford Sierra. And the story has a lovely photograph of
It does, I was looking
the,
at that.
the Escort Mark III on the ski slopes.
Yeah, they tied it in very nicely. If you look at the visuals as well, they talk about the numbers and it's a slippery slope. Okay, hey,
Yeah,
times
yeah.
have worked there.
See
Yeah,
what they did there?
they
Yeah,
do,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But
So,
yeah,
just heading back to the story. So, this is very much back on the new car registrations for October, which rose by 26% to 134,000. But as the piece points out, in reality, it's pretty much a reversal of what was a disastrous October last year when sales crashed by nearly 25%. So that leaves car sales down in the year to date by just over 5% at 1.34 million. And the SMMT has given up hope of matching the 1.65 million cars registered last year with its new forecast.
yeah, I mean, the supply is starting to return a little bit in certain areas, but as it's starting to return, the consumer confidence and consumer demand, because of the cost of living, because of the energy crisis, is also slowing, unfortunately. So, product is starting to return to the market at a time where the market is not in demand for it. Order banks are starting to ease off a little bit now. Those lead times on new cars are starting to slow as sort of the backfill gets completed. So the October performance kind of showed some positivity in terms of a year on year, but again, still leaves us significantly behind pre-pandemic volumes, and as you said there, Curtis, probably a slower return. SMMT are saying that they're expecting the market to return to a 1.8 million market in 2023, which is still obviously significantly behind that sort of 2 million market that we've been used to in a pre-pandemic world. But obviously a slower return than maybe SMMT felt it was going to be at the start of the year.
Yeah, and they do actually say that they expect it to rise to 1.9 million in 2024, and that's according to the forecast that they put out last week.
So sticking with kind of SMMT, but moving across to motortrader.com, and this is on the back of the Q3 used vehicle transaction results being published. And the headline is that used car sales down 12% in the third quarter, first time sub 2 million since 2015 for that period. So again, showing that the 1.785 million was the result for the third quarter, and that takes the year to date down to 5.3 million. Which would be a year on year of minus 9.7% in comparison. So starting to see that pressure in the used vehicle market, which will be a consequence of demand, but also availability of product now that we're seeing in that used car market.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that within the mix, used battery electric vehicles, which is obviously an area that we're always interested in because it's still relatively new, and it's coming from a very low point. But sales of battery electric vehicles bucked the trend, reflecting the growth in that
Mm.
part of the market, rising demand with activity up 44.1% to 16,700 transactions. So it's up by a lot, but the transactions are still relatively small because we're talking about sub 17,000 transactions there.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a quote here from Mike Hawes, who's the CEO of SMT, that's saying that given the short supply of new cars due to largely the sustained chip shortage, a decline in used car market comes as little surprise. Although it's great to see growing numbers of used buyers able to get into the electric vehicle market. And then it goes on further to talk about obviously the autumn statement, although they're not calling it the autumn statement, which is due out, I think, 17th, is it, Curtis?
It
It's
is,
next
yeah.
week.
Yeah.
And sort of seeing where the government are trying to help sort of that long term fiscal of the EV market for the UK, whether that's around that emission, adequate charging, etc. So I think the automotive sector is obviously waiting to see what comes out of that statement, where it may help the sector moving forward.
Next story is from Car Dealer, and the headline there is nearly half of car buyers plan to spend more on their next vehicle. So this is quite an interesting one. That's based on research carried out by eBay Motors Group, and it's looking at what buyers are considering in terms of their price expectations on both new and used cars. And this is for buyers who are in the market right now and those who are planning to buy over the coming months. And it actually drills down into looking at also how much more they expect to pay according to how they finance, whether they go for outright purchase or some degree of financing. So looking at some of the figures here, so the data collected as part of this research for eBay Motors Group's Consumer Insight Panel study found that 46% of in market buyers are now expecting to pay more than they would have done previously. But this expectation actually rises sharply to 66% for buyers who are either currently searching for their next car or plan to search within the next month. So I think what this is showing is that buyers are savvy. They know that prices have gone up. They know how inflation has impacted new car prices and how used car prices are tracking at still very high levels.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they obviously look at it from a per car basis, and they talk here about obviously the outright purchases think that their next car will cost 22% more than the last one, whilst those opting for monthly payments only think they will spend 7% more. And the difference is they talk about it being more pronounced on the used car buyers who think their next car will cost up to 28% more, compared to the 7% on the monthly payment. So, as you say there, Curtis, not they know that the costs are going up. They know that they're going to have to pay more for the next vehicle. And you know what? They've been watching the headlines, haven't they? Probably over the last 18 months of
Yeah.
these prices increases for new and used cars, and know that it's not coming down.
Yeah, and interesting quote here from Lucy Tugby, who's marketing director at eBay Motors Group, who says the price inflation of new and used cars is a reality, and our research shows in-market car buyers are factoring this in when they go online to search for their next purchase. And she goes on to say, with rising interest rates adding to the pressure on household budgets, the research shows how car buyers are being pragmatic but will still be searching for the best possible value for their money, especially those buying out of necessity.
Yeah, so I suppose for the dealers and the retailers listening, that that we know that the used car prices are higher. We know that finance rates are increasing and obviously having an influence on the PCP, or the high purchase, or however those vehicles are funded. And positively, it's not all negative. Consumers do know that these cars are going to cost them more money, which is positive news for the dealer network.
You're listening to All the Chat at the Matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed. Next up is this week's Menable Moment from our mental health and well-being guru, Stephen Whitten. This week, Stephen, who's fresh from AM Live, talks about friendship, comradeship, standing shoulder to shoulder, and family, especially as we mark Remembrance Sunday this weekend.
Yeah, hi guys. Thanks for having me back for another Menable Moments. I can't believe it's 2 weeks since the last one. Time really is flying. And I want to mark this one on this Remembrance Weekend with, as you might expect, a little bit of a mention for the whole thing around comradeship and family and friendship. Now, ultimately, of course, this weekend is about commemorating and to some extent celebrating the sacrifices made by those before us who have laid down their lives in pursuit of peace and so on. And at this very difficult time that we're at, I guess that makes Remembrance Weekend this year particularly poignant. So I wanted to just mention that in the context of, as I said, comradeship, friendship, family, and just mention that I was at AM Live this week. Now, I only managed to squeeze in a very quick visit because I was doing something else. I'm going to come back to that in a minute as well. But even just being there for an hour or so just reminded me what a great level of family and comradeship we have across our industry. And I've got to be honest, there's been a few times where I've despaired of it and I've thought, do you know what? I could do with going to work somewhere else. And when I have done that in the past, the quick conclusion that I come up with is when you go elsewhere outside of our industry, one, the magnetic draw of our sector is too strong and it pulls you back. But two, when you look around other areas, you think, actually, it's the same rubbish, different wallpaper. And I was going to say something else about that phrase then, but you know what I mean. It's, there's the same issues and challenges going on elsewhere. But the strength that we have in our sector is that we really are all comrades. And yes, there's competition and, you know, we're at times sort of competing with each other for results and stuff, but we are all together. And at this poignant weekend, I just want to re-emphasise the need for shoulder to shoulder, support each other and look out for each other. Now, I was at an event where I was doing a keynote talk at a diversity and inclusion conference for a large and, dare I say, very progressive dealer group. Now, you've only got to look at my LinkedIn to see who it is. I'm not going to mention them, but you know who you are if you're listening. And wow, blew me away. Absolutely blew me away. I've said for some time that the whole thing around mental health and well-being is going to involve some realignment and readjustment of cultures and working practice across our industry. And in that organisation in particular, they have a whole bunch of people who are quite prepared to come forward, share their story, be vulnerable, and say, look, I've had struggles, I'm having struggles, and we all need to stand shoulder to shoulder and work this thing out together, like comrades and friends and family. So I was absolutely mesmerised by this group yesterday. Obviously, I did a talk there as well, so hopefully I gave something back. But it's buoyed me up no end, and I'm absolutely buzzing at what the future could potentially be when we all start doing that in this organisation, in this industry rather. So take whatever you want from that, but let's keep standing shoulder to shoulder. And like I said, at this commemorative weekend, let's remember that we are all comrades and we're all in this together. See you soon, guys. Take care, and thanks again for all your support.
Well, many thanks, Steve. And yeah, great Menable moment as ever. And if you would like to get in touch with Stephen, then just head over to menable.org, or you can email him at stephen.witten@menable.org, and that's Stephen with a PH.
It was like a podcast reunion this week. You missed Steve this week at the AM Live, but I managed to be there.
Yes, yeah, and
unfortunately, it made me very late getting home, in the bad books a little bit. But
funnily enough, I caught up with Steve, and he said the same about you.
It's made me very late home, but anyway, it was I think great to see you yesterday, Steve. If you are listening this morning to the podcast, and from Curtis and I, thanks for everything you continue to do with the support and what you're doing in the Menable. For the industry in the hall, and it was actually great to see you and talk to you yesterday in person. So thanks for everything on that.
Yeah, and our challenge to each other is to get the three of us in the same room at the same time.
Yes, yes, we did
Next
kind of
year,
mention that.
let's aim
Yeah, we
big.
won't commit too
Next
much
year,
on this
yeah.
year. Yeah, yeah, the year's getting away with us. But back to the headlines then. So on Auto Retail Agenda, they've covered the Helston garage story, and saying that it's to be split and sold to Virtue, Yeomans, and Rybrook. Now, if anybody doesn't know the Helston garage, it's probably more your territory, this, isn't it, Curtis, than mine. It's sort of down
Yeah.
Cornwall, Devon, Somerset, around that area. They have 37 franchise sites across the business that include 5 Volvo, 5 Peugeot, Safimi, 5 BMW, 4 Mini, 4 Jaguar, Land Rover, 4 Skoda, 2 VW cars, 2 VW commercial vehicles, an Audi, and a Ferrari dealership, which I think is in Cornwall, is the Ferrari dealership. So no small group by any stretch there, but yeah, it's been sold. It's a family business. It's been sold, and Virtue are taking the majority out in terms of numbers of sites, but then Yeomans and Rybrook are getting the rest.
Yeah, and it's probably just worth pointing out that this is all based on a statement that Virtue released to the stock exchange during the week, and within the statement, they say they confirm that it is in advanced discussion regarding the potential acquisition of Helston Garages. And they point out it's a privately owned, predominantly premium manufacturer
Mm.
automotive retail group based in the southwest. And it does say that these discussions may or may not lead to a
Yes.
transaction.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that there's some small print here that's worth paying attention to, and
Quite a
funding.
detailed output for something that
Yeah,
may or
yeah,
not may
yeah,
not
no,
happen. So
definitely.
they obviously are in deep conversations, but as you say there, clear that it isn't a done deal. Is what, and these deals can go sour right at the last minute, can't they? So they've been very clear that this is not a signed contract deal at the minute.
Yeah, although interestingly, Auto Retail Agenda within the story says that it understands that should the sale be successful, it's likely to be completed by the end of the month. So we'll see on that. And if it does go through, it will be hot on the heels of Virtue's acquisition of Alan Jeffries that we were just
Yes.
talking about last weekend. So that was two Motorrad BMW motorcycle businesses in Yorkshire. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we'll see how this one pans out.
And the story does say that although Virtue are taking or will potentially take the majority, that they're not getting the Porsche. Does it say that the Porsche is going to Rybrook's?
Yeah,
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 and the VW will be going to Yeomans. The one thing that isn't clear in this is Ferrari,
yeah,
because it doesn't know where the Ferrari business is going. It does assume, I think, probably by default, that Virtue are getting the Ferrari, and maybe we can ask that question to see if that is Virtue's first, if they are getting Ferrari, and if it is the first Ferrari dealership for Virtue,
yeah.
which would
I
be
think it will
interesting.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But again, if this deal does go through, this will change the standings of the AM 100, won't it, Curtis? In terms of
Oh, that's a
where,
good point, actually.
yeah, I
Yes,
think
because when we had Robert on,
mm,
Virtue were number 4. So will that nudge them up a place?
I think there was some chatter this week that yes, it would, if
Yeah,
this goes through, based on the volume turnover of Helston's and the expectations of it. So, again, although Robert on the interview did say he doesn't chase anything, there's no particular targets. He just looks for acquisition opportunities when they become available. And you know what, if that moves him further up the AM 100 or whatever that does for the business, then that's what it does. So, again, I know you'll be listening, Robert, this weekend. Hope it all goes well, fingers crossed. We know it's not a done deal yet, and when it does go through, then you know where we are, and you're welcome to obviously come on and talk us through the deal. I suspect the some of the hurdles and some of the challenges that you may have had to to get through to get the deal done if it does go through. So good luck with that one.
Next headline is from Motor Trader, and it's Stellantis UK introduces home delivery for spotty car used cars. You know what, Phil? I'm having problems with spotty cars, so I just want to say Spotify.
Yes, yeah, you need to keep that. Yeah, it's a
Yeah, no,
difficult one.
it's really difficult. So this is Stellantis's approved used car
Yes.
scheme, which we've reported on before when it was launched earlier in the year. So it covers all six Stellantis brands, which are Peugeot, Citroën, Fiat, Abarth, Vauxhall, and Jeep. And what this latest announcement is, it's really extending the offering to purely online if customers want to do it that way. So it can be purely online, it can be hybrid, but quite an interesting move this because it does take them sort of head to head with some of the specialist online retailers
Yeah, I mean
potentially.
it's a significant. I mean, if you think about that sort of classified marketplace, and when you actually dig into Spotty Car in terms of their European offering, I can't remember the number. It's in the millions of vehicles that are on that platform because basically
Yeah.
taking every single used car from that Stellantis brand right across UK and Europe and placing it in a consumer platform offering through Spotty Car. So this has been a kind of a sort of quiet move in the background there, but obviously moving very very quickly. And as you say, they're using their dealer network footprint to offer those home deliveries. And I think previously it was up to the dealer whether they did a home delivery or not. It wasn't part of the Spotty Car approved element of vehicles, but obviously what they've done now is moved to that next stage and made it part of the Spotty Car approval scheme that home delivery is available, which is a great move for this because it's kind of nudging towards that the significant player in that classified market.
Yeah, definitely, and they do make the point that all electric vehicles ordered for home delivery will actually be provided to the customer fully charged. So yeah, that saves a bit of hassle, doesn't it, on day one?
Yes, it does. It
How
does.
do I charge it?
So, I mean, sticking with Stellantis, we're moving on to AM on this one, and this is Stellantis-owned Aramis Group snaps up Kazoo's Italian car retail operations. Now, obviously, some weeks ago, it was announced that Kazoo were pulling out of Italy as part of their sort of European U-turn, should we say? And it wasn't quite clear of who was taking that side of the business on. I know I think there was a subscription business that they bought, didn't they, in
Yes.
Italy as well. And I'm not clear of what's happened with that, whether it's been purely mothballed or whether it's been sold. But this story is covering that the Stellantis-owned used car retail business, which is Aramis, has actually taken that business on in Italy. But the Aramis may not be sort of synonymous with everybody listening, will it, Curtis? Because it's not a name that you really know in the
Yeah.
UK.
Although, interestingly, it is a majority shareholder
Mm.
in the UK-based carsupermarket.com and motordepot.com, both obviously used car supermarket businesses. And the story does actually say that it will rebrand Kazoo's online retail offering as Brum Brum as it starts to integrate that operation. Yeah, Brum Brum, which is where we were.
Yes, yeah, it was on it this week, and actually now we're starting to see that strategic plans now start to present itself from Stellantis of what they're doing on that previous story, obviously around that spotty car element of Stellantis and what they're doing with their dealer network in the UK and obviously across Europe. But actually, how they're now starting to acquire and grow this business as well through the Aramis group there. So again, it's great news for Stellantis on what they're up to.
Yeah, and final story this week comes from CNBC, and it's Carvana stock tanks in continued sell-off, which is my favourite headline of the week. So, yeah, this is shares in Carvana have plummeted and this was reported midway through the week, so they'd plummeted for the second consecutive trading day as investors were unloading shares of what CNBC describes as the embattled used car seller amid growing challenges for the company and a softening for the industry. Now, Carvana is probably best known as well. It was the fastest growing online used car dealer in the US, and I remember from various NADA trips where Carvana was really held up as the model for used car retailing because it was growing so quickly. And yeah, pe- people in the UK will be aware of it because of its the way that it actually retailed cars with those multi-story car vending machines, which always made for good photo opportunities. But part of the issue seems to be falling used car prices in the US, which I guess is what makes it particularly interesting for us in the UK as we sort of come to grips with what will happen with used car values. But they peaked in January and they've fallen something like 15% in the year to date. So Carvana were in a position where they were buying stock high and now they're forced to sell it a lot cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, there's reports out there. It's not covered in the CNBC story, but that they've faced several challenges in 2022, including the mounting losses of $945 million in the first half of the year. You did hear that correctly.
Ouch,
Yeah,
ouch.
with that additional 508 million loss in the third quarter. Now, that's in comparison to Cavana's loss in the first 9 months of last year, that was 1.45 billion.
Yeah.
In 9 months. Oh, sorry, no, through the first half of 9 months of this year is 1.45 billion, in contrast to 105 million in the same period of last year. So, yeah, it's you can see why the shares are not really doing well. They are facing some significant challenges, financial losses there, and there's other stories in there about them at the minute because they've got a few battles going on in certain states, haven't they, in the US, Curtis?
Yeah, they've got some problems with licenses in certain states, so they do seem to be hitting this sort of perfect storm at the moment, don't they?
Yeah, yeah. So when we talk about challenges in the UK and around supply constraints and things like that, when things start to go a little bit tough in the US, you're talking very big numbers, aren't you? So you can go from very big profits when you're riding the crest of the wave, but when it does go a little bit tough and you get some challenges there, then you are talking some significantly big losses as Carvana are starting to see with their share prices now on the stock market.
Yeah, and Carvana co-founder and CEO Ernie Garcia describing the year as a difficult one, probably a bit of an understatement there,
Yeah.
and citing a normalization of the used vehicle industry from its inflated levels and increasing interest rates, among other factors that are impacting the business at the moment.
But as we said right at the start of the show, we'll be putting the headlines in the newsletter. So, out of a lot of the stories we've talked about today, this is a great one to have a read when you get a minute there, because there's some good videos and some good stats there, and a few links that take you into a couple of the other things that are happening over in the US. So when you start to think about things in the UK, it's fascinating. I know that I think Robert Forrester shared this story this week. So again, it'll be in the newsletter on Monday if you do want to read the story in more detail alongside all the other headlines that we've talked about today.
But you know what, Phil? That's all for now. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. Many thanks for joining us for all the chatter that matters. We're back with the headlines next weekend. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.